Hey, what is up guys? So we are going to be going over the best decks after the September 1st ban list, and I'll be doing deck profiles of every single one of these decks down below in the description box, but at the moment I'm going to still be uploading these, so they might be not available at the moment you see this video. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So first off, we have Blackwings. Now that Blackwell went to 3, a lot of players are very excited to be playing Blackwings, plus they've gotten reprinted so many times. I mean, not quite the amount of times that Utopia's got its reprint, but they've gotten reprinted a decent amount of times. Next up, we have Chaos Dragons. Now that, we have BLS plus Catastrophe getting a reprint, you can definitely just pick up 3 of the structure decks, throw in a BLS, and you'll be good to go with a pretty easy deck to play. Plus, it's a structure deck, so pretty easy to get a hold of all the cards at one time. Next up, we have Monarchs. Now, Monarchs are a pretty easy deck to play, whether you're playing some type of removal Monarchs, which are kind of be a little bit difficult to play now that we have Macro and Defisher, but you can definitely make use of cards like Battle Fader and cards like Soul Exchange, where you contribute your opponent's monster, and there's going to be more support coming out for Monarchs. This is the Monarch version of Black Whirlwind coming out relatively soon, so easy deck to play and easy to get most of the cards. Next up, we have Agents. Agents is a pretty easy deck to play as well. There are times where you have to know when to, overextend in the deck, especially when you're able to drop a Christia. This card pretty much just wins games on its own. Another structure deck that's really easy to pick up and learn how to play, but like I said, there are times where we're going to have to learn when to actually overextend. Next up, we have Darkworld, another structure deck, and every time this deck sneaks by the ban list, I'm always like, they're going to hit something in Darkworld, and then nothing gets touched. Technically, they lost card destruction, but the deck can definitely still play it without it, and it's a very easy deck to play, plus it's a structure deck. Next up, we have TG. They freed my boy, TG Striker. Now, with Heavy gone, this deck is very, very viable. There's so many different ways to play TGs, plus they can main deck skill drains and creature swaps to steal your monsters and still get their effects, so TG's looking pretty good, but this deck is going to be a little bit more difficult to play, so you're going to have more experience with the deck, practice a little bit more to actually get the hang of the deck. Next up, we have Battlin Boxers. Now, this deck didn't really get a chance to shine, but it's definitely a good deck, especially with 5, back row that you can set pretty safely, with Heavy being, banned. Now, if you go for a first turn a Yoke play, that card is still pretty good. I mean, there are times where your opponent has to use all their resources to get over Yoke, and then you end up deprisoning whatever their answer was to finally get rid of Yoke. So that card is pretty good, especially with Heavy banned. A lot of players are going to be main decking like multiple Mirror Forces, so, Yoke can just eat up all the back row for you. And next up, we have Zombies. Now, with Mizuki going to 2, the deck is still pretty good. Zombies have always been, there. It's not a bad deck, a little bit of a slower deck, and now, the format's moving into a slower pace. Zombies are definitely pretty good, especially with the boost of, Mizuki. And the deck is going to be a deck that you're going to need more practice in. Like I said, some of these decks are going to need a little bit more practice in than some of these other decks, but it's definitely a really easy budget deck. Plus, Mizuki got reprinted as a common. Next up, we have Gladiator Beasts. Now, I know Bestiary didn't get put to 2, but realistically, Heavy was the main reason why Glads weren't seeing play, because Glads, if they open up with like War Chariot and multiple back row and Heavy's gone, they're pretty much good to go. So, Gladiator Beasts, it's going to be a little bit more of a difficult deck to play, but definitely good if you get in the practice that you need. Also, going first is very important in Glads, so if you're one of those players that doesn't like going second, yeah, you might not want to play this deck. Next up, we have the ZW, or Zexal Weapon Utopia deck. Pretty easy deck to play, but with all those backers, you gotta watch out, you gotta know when to make the plays, so it's gonna be a little bit more difficult because sometimes you're not gonna be able to make the Utopia when your opponent sets so many darn back row. Next up, we have Gravekeepers, another structure deck, plus it's really easy to play, plus Royal Tribute, it steals games, and the deck is relatively inexpensive, other than like Recruiters, like a rare, but the deck is pretty easy to play as well. Next up, we have 6 Samurais. I know that they lost Gateway, but don't get me wrong, guys. 6 Samurais is still a pretty darn good deck, simply because we're moving into a slower paced format, and 6 Samurais, if they go for first turn Shien, set a bunch of back row, they don't have to worry about Heavy Storm. So if they protect the Shien, plus all the back row you set, they have Shien to negate, so keep that in mind as well. Plus it's a structure deck, so it's a pretty easy deck to build. Next up, we have Inzektors. Now, I know that you can definitely use the Transmodify, but that won't be a budget variant. But you can definitely use other cards like Heart of Clearwater, as well as Insect Imitation. Insect Imitation is actually the same as Transmodify, only it's actually better because you can activate multiple per turn. So Inzektors, pretty easy deck to play, and you don't have to worry about other decks. You're really getting in the way because all the back row, like Deprisons and other things like Mirror Force, you really don't have to worry about because you'll just be like pop, 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 and then you go for your attack. Now, the next deck isn't technically out yet, but I figure I'll mention it because it's going to be coming out relatively soon, is the whole Blue-Eyed Maiden deck, simply because it's a really easy deck to build because it's a structure deck. You throw in maybe a BLS from the reprint and a few other cards, and you'll be good to go with a huge 3,000 attacker. Basically, that's really easy to get out with little to no cost. Next up, we have Karakuris. Now, you're going to have to wait a few days to actually play this deck because if you are a budget player, you got to wait for that Bure reprint, but you can definitely go online, get some practice in with Karakuris, and the deck is a little bit more of a difficult deck to play because you need to know when to overextend and when to make certain cards in the deck. So a little bit more of a practice deck that you'll be required to actually take in before you actually get your wins in. Next up, we have XXX-Sabers. This deck was so good. I know Invoker is technically not a budget card, but you can definitely get away with playing the deck without the Invoker because, you can still make, this card over here, especially when, in a format where people are going to be setting a lot. Hyunlei plus maybe a back row of like 7 tools, you'll be good to go. You don't have to worry about that back row, and you can just pop everything and go for game. Hyunlei, a fantastic card in XXX-Sabers, and, XXX-Sabers are relatively inexpensive as well. Next up, we have Windups. Depending on, what you actually want to use as far as in the extra deck, it can be considered, semi non-budget, but the deck is pretty easy to learn how to play, and you can definitely make use of, all the reprints, like, Wind-Up Shark has gotten its reprint, and that was kind of the only card that was expensive. Pretty much everything else, pretty easy to obtain. Next up, we have Heroes. Now, there's so many different ways to play Heroes, but I think that, in a format where, a lot of players are setting back row, just go all in for the Hero Lives is always the best idea. OCG has been doing it forever. They always, no fear, just go in for game. I know you guys lost Stratos, but don't worry. Hero Lives at 3 definitely allows you to still OTK pretty easy. Now, some other decks that I want to go over that aren't necessarily like cheap budget, but they still are kind of considered budget. I mean, you don't have to be like y'all Balgruff over here to actually be able to afford these decks, but these decks might just be a little bit more expensive than some of these other decks. So let's go ahead and go over these. So first off, we have Constellars. Sombrace is kind of the only card that's expensive, so maybe if you pulled maybe 2 of these, you can definitely make Constellars. Nothing got hit in the deck, plus Bear's getting a reprint, so you have another target with your tanky to search out for. Plus, a first turn Pleiades definitely still has a lot of control over the game. Next up, Evilswarms. Cerceon or Kurakion is kind of the only expensive card, and you can definitely get away without playing that card, but XYZ Encore definitely does ruin Ophion. But a first turn Ophion is still pretty good against some of these decks like Chaos Dragons or Agents, so it's still a pretty decent deck. Now, next up we have the Hieratic or Hieratic Dragons. They're pretty good, but depending on the extra deck, it might kind of get a little bit expensive. But the deck is probably one of the best decks for the OTK, especially since they have a Wing Beat Dragon, which basically blows up the entire back row. Actually, let me show you guys this card. Let me go ahead and show you. So you basically you just special summon like Tefnuit, and then you return him to the hand, and then you destroy all spell and trap cards in the field. Then you just go ahead and special summon the Tefnuit once again. This guy over here. Let me just go ahead and show you guys him. So if you're interested in playing the deck, you can kind of see how it works. So basically, he's a Cyber Dragon, and then you can basically just blow up your opponent's entire field. Next up, we have Madolches. Now, Madolche is kind of like the only expensive card really, and Invoker as well. But it's still considered a budget deck. I mean, it's no E-Dragons where you have to put a mortgage on your house or like sell a whole bunch of your stuff to actually build the deck, but these decks, like I said over here in the side deck, they're a little bit more expensive. I kind of consider them budget, but yeah. Next up we have Lightsworn for our final budget deck. Now Lightsworn, pretty much the only card that hasn't gotten its reprint that really needed it. Again, I mean, Soul Recharge actually technically had its reprint, but it's still kind of an expensive card, especially because you usually want to play, like 2 to 3, especially if you're playing Chaos Dragons, to make the deck much faster. But Lightsworn is still a very easy deck to play, and it would be considered, in my opinion, a budget. I like how on the high it's $50, $45, but you can get it low for a quarter. That's a huge gap, but it's because it's probably going by like the secret rare one as well as the common one. So Lightsworn, very easy deck to play. So like I said, everything will be down below in the description box eventually. So let me know in the comment section below if you felt like I missed out on any great budget decks, as well as what decks you want to see uploaded first, because I'm going to be going over all of these decks, and like I said, I'll be doing deck profiles of all these decks, but I'm going to be doing them as I go along, and I figured I'd upload this video first so some of you guys know what to expect as far as the metagame, plus maybe you guys can actually build the deck yourselves, and then you can see my build and you can tweak it, and if you like some of the cards I'm using, you can definitely make use of those as well. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and be expected to play some of these decks because there are going to be a lot of players playing these decks. There's always new players jumping into the game, and this will help you newer players decide what you want to actually play. And I also want to mention, before you actually start building these decks in real life, go online, play on Dueling Network, play on DevPro to see actually what deck that you actually kind of like, because you can build a deck and it can be good, but you might not like how it plays. Even if you're getting the win, there are times where I play a deck and I'm winning, but I don't like how the deck plays because it's not just it's not fun for me. So go online, play the deck for a long time, see what deck you like on Dueling Network and DevPro. Play with the deck for free first, essentially, and then build the deck in real life. And like I said, some of these tins are coming out in about 8 days, so you can definitely make use of the Boy reprint as well as the Blacklisted Soldier Envoy of the Beginning reprint. But anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Asian Eyes signing out.